Good morning. Welcome to the programme. Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's right-hand man, has gone. He quit yesterday over his decision to push for Peter Mandelson to get the US ambassador job. And look, it is impossible to overstate how important Morgan McSweeney has been for the Starmer project. And in losing him, really, Keir Starmer has played his last card.
The question now is, will it be enough to save his premiership? Well, Keir Starmer will be hoping that with his lightning rod chief of staff gone, the party can now move on from the Mandelson saga. But of course, his leadership rivals are circling. Let's bring in Mari, who is here with us. Mari, just for those tuning in for the first time, recap kind of the timeline of how this unfolded, because he announced his resignation, Morgan McSweeney, a matter of hours after Pat McFadden was sitting just about here saying, no, he doesn't need to go.
Exactly, yeah. So Pat McFadden on Trevor Phillips on Sky News about 9 o'clock in the morning was saying, you know, all this stuff about Morgan McSweeney is beside the point. This was a prime ministerial decision. It was the PM who made the decision, and therefore the decision is the PM's responsibility. So kind of pushing it back on the PM. And then by 2 o'clock, Morgan McSweeney had resigned. And we understand that the Prime Minister and Morgan McSweeney decided it was the right time, the right moment to move on, as it were. And so that's kind of how we got to where we are. Now, in terms of the reaction from different political parties, now all the opposition parties are, of course, capitalising on this. Tories saying that this is actually the PM pointing fingers at other people, never taking responsibility for himself. The Lib Dems saying they should want a confidence vote. Reform saying this is just continuation of Tory chaos. The Greens saying it's not enough, the PM's got to go. So all the opposition parties are pointing the finger at Labour and saying this is a disaster, this is a disgrace. Now, in terms of what we're expecting this week, how is Number 10 and the PM going to try and salvage the situation? Well, first of all, tonight, the Prime Minister is going to be addressing the Parliamentary Labour Party, trying to rally the troops and persuade his MPs to stick with him. He's going to be addressing the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party after PMQs on Wednesday as well, specifically, of course, because the Mandelson affair has been about trafficking women and exploiting women. And so female MPs are in despair at what we've seen and how it's been allowed to be brushed to the side because of somebody's supposed incredible talents. But also, this week is about Number 10 trying to show what the PM is going to do, taking hard action as a result of what we've seen. So they're going to be focusing on his values. They're going to be focusing on why he's the right person to do some of this repair work, to try and salvage the situation. They're going to emphasise on his view and his opinion on public service and his commitment to public service. They're going to talk about how he recognises how much public trust has been damaged by this affair. They're going to talk about how he's got a long-standing commitment to high standards in public life, and then they're going to point to all the changes he's already made around those kinds of things. And we are going to be expecting to hear more from the PM in the coming days on that work that's being done, going further, looking at the appointments process, looking at lobbying rules. So that's the plan for the week.
I just want to take a moment to kind of really reflect on what a massive moment this is, what a critical moment this is. Morgan McSweeney, right? I mean, we talk about advisors an awful lot, you know, in Westminster it feels like. But it is impossible to overstate how important this guy is for Keir Starmer. I mean, he is Starmerism. He's kind of the whole project, in a way. And I guess my question this morning is this a roll of the dice that may mean that he has done enough to draw a line under it all? He's made the biggest sacrifice, the sacrifice that many people are calling on. Or is this actually really the beginning of the end? Is this going to hasten his demise? Because he's got rid of the brains, the heart behind Starmerism, behind the project. He's also got rid of someone who's been acting as a bit of a human shield. And so I guess that is my question this morning. Where does it leave Keir Starmer?
So Starmer's team will argue that he's the right guy for the job, and this is why we need to stick by him, that actually he's the best person. If you look at some of his rivals, they would make a disaster of this. We can't turn into the Tories. We've got to stick with the leader. That will be their argument. But if you speak to a lot of Labour MPs, the majority of them are telling me, now maybe I'm speaking to the wrong ones, but the majority of them are telling me he's on borrowed time. At this point, it's a when, not if. And the question will be, how can they pick the timing, whether that's after the May local elections? And really, it's a case of managing that.
I mean, to your point, Sophie, as well, about whether it speeds things up, a lot of the opposition parties are making the case, which seems to be fairly reasonable, to say, well, if we're now admitting that a head needed to roll in and around the appointment of Peter Mandelson, it's not a great defence to say, well, the person who drew up the advice is the one that deserves to go, not the person that made the final decision. And in that sense, it definitely doesn't feel like, line has been drawn under it.
And that was Pat McFadden's point, by the way, as well.
Yeah.
He was saying it was a prime ministerial appointment.
Exactly. And then, the only other thing I'd say is this is unbelievably big moment, as you say, with Morgan McSweeney. I still wonder whether the biggest moment was last week when we saw another vote in Parliament that he couldn't win, despite his massive parliamentary majority, on an issue now that wasn't about welfare cuts or wasn't about the two-child benefit cap. It was basically the opposition trying to put political pressure on the Prime Minister, and he couldn't win it. Yeah. So he just doesn't have the authority of his own MPs.
That is the trust. It was about trust, and the fact is his MPs do not trust him. And that is a fundamental problem for Keir Starmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say, if you lose the confidence of your MPs, it's almost like the trajectory all the way back to that welfare vote. And that is a problem. How can you govern? How can you...
Those votes, those earlier ones, you could just about say, OK, everyone will fall back in line again, because the welfare thing was such an important issue for them individually. Moving on, the Prime Minister has authority. But last week, you can't hide behind that policy issue. It was basically the opposition trying to cause him political pressure, and they didn't stand to the defence of their Prime Minister. Big moments.
Yeah, Mari, going to be a busy week for you, I'm
sure.
We'll speak to you soon. Busy moment on the programme as well. We're going to be talking to Jackie Smith for the government very soon. Also, the newly acquired MP for Reform UK, Robert Jenrick, as well. Right, it's a huge week in Westminster. Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, the right-hand man of Keir Starmer, the man who really kind of masterminded his landslide election victory, he's gone. He's out over his decision to push for the appointment of Peter Mandelson as US Ambassador. But I guess the question now moves to Keir Starmer. Has he done enough to save his premiership? Did he play his last card in vain? We'll be trying to find out a little bit more with our next guest, the Skills Minister, Baroness Jackie Smith. Great to have you on the programme.
Good morning.
So, Jackie, Morgan McSweeney is gone. Should he have?
Well, I think Morgan himself explained why he felt that, having given the advice that he did, he wanted to take responsibility for that. And, of course, I suspect, recognising, as I've seen a few times in my career, that when the advisor becomes the story, it's probably right that they move aside.
It's difficult to overstate the importance of Morgan McSweeney to the Starmerism project. I think that's fair to say. He was absolutely at the heart of the election victory. He's been at Keir Starmer's side ever since. I mean, he is the Starmerism project. Can Keir Starmer survive without him?
Well, Morgan McSweeney certainly played an important role with Keir in, first of all, changing and recovering, I would say, the Labour Party to a position where it could win the general election in 2024 and helping to win that election and for the first 18 months in government. But it was Keir Starmer that led the party to win that election, to win a 5-year term, to change the country. And it's Keir Starmer that will continue to lead that change.
You can't downplay his role, though.
Well, I think I just said that
he was really important.
I think I just said that I thought he played an important role, and I certainly, and I know others are grateful to him for, particularly for the change that he made in our party after a disastrous previous election result to enable us to be in the position where Keir Starmer can lead the change that this country needs.
Can I just ask you a little bit about how the decision was reached? Because yesterday, in the morning, Pat McFadden was sitting basically where you are, and he backed Morgan McSweeney just hours before he ended up going. I think we might better play you what Pat McFadden said yesterday morning. Let's just listen.
I don't think he should. In the end, it's a prime ministerial, well, signed off by the King, but it's a prime ministerial appointment, and prime ministers have to take responsibility for the decisions that they make.
So he's saying that he didn't think Morgan McSweeney should go. So I guess what went on? Did the Prime Minister change his mind on Sunday, or did he just forget to tell the Minister on the morning round what was going on?
No, I think it was Morgan that made the decision, and as I understand it, had been thinking about it certainly since the beginning of the... But there's a
communications issue there.
Well, no, look,
very odd,
come on, Sophie. People like me, people like Pat, that come onto programmes like this are going to be supportive of people that we have worked closely with. but it was Morgan who thought about the position that he was in, and particularly, as I say, the extent to which he'd become the story, and decided that the best thing for the government that he had worked hard to ensure got into power was able to carry on doing the work for the country that is so important.
So are you saying, that Keir Starmer didn't want him to go? Did he want to keep Morgan McSweeney?
My understanding is that Morgan McSweeney made the decision, Keir accepted it, they agreed together that that was the right thing to do.
Because, that's my point, I guess, because this is the thing, it's not just that Keir Starmer, the briefing that we've had is that they jointly decided it was the right thing to do.
Well, that's what I think I just said. So now the priority
it's not just the decision of Morgan McSweeney, that's my point.
So now the priority is for the Prime Minister, who has taken responsibility for the mistakes made in appointing Peter Mandelson, both to put right what went wrong there and to carry on the work of change in the country. And I think that's what he'll be focusing on this morning.
The problem is, sacking your closest advisor is a bit...
Well, I think we've both agreed he didn't sack his closest advisor, haven't we?
OK, I'll rephrase. Coming to a joint decision with your closest advisor that the best thing that should happen is for them to go is playing your last card, right? It's getting rid of the human shield, the lightning rod. We've seen it with previous premierships as well. It's almost the beginning of the end. And there's already signs that it's not enough. Clive Lewis, for example, Morgan McSweeney's resignation should not be treated as a cleansing moment. He was not an aberration. He was the tip of the iceberg. It's not going to be enough, is it? It's almost hastening his demise.
No Prime Minister has a human shield. Every Prime Minister is exposed and responsible for the decisions that they make in government. Okay. That's something that Keir Starmer has always taken seriously, and it's what he'll continue to work on.
Will he still be Prime Minister this time next year?
I very much hope so. I think the last thing that the country or the party could do with at the moment is a lengthy leadership campaign. Look,
what would you say on that? Just on that, what would you say to all your colleagues who are really helpfully briefing the press, saying that they actually warned Keir Starmer about Mandelson all along?
Well, as I have previously said when I've come on your programme, Sophie, at times like this, I think it would be better, given that we were elected to change the country, if people focused on doing that rather than on thinking about who the future leader may or may not be at some point or another.
Because and how's that focus going?
There is a big job to be done.
How's that focus going? Is the party focused? Is the cabinet focused?
Yeah, well, I believe they are, and I believe that they should be.
Do you really?
Well,
all of them?
I've just said I think some of them should probably concentrate a bit more, and certainly they should get their advisors to concentrate a bit more on the change we're making to the country rather than the change that might happen to the leadership of the Labour Party at some point in the distant future. And that's what the Prime Minister is and needs to be focused on now.
You and Peter Mandelson go way back, right? You both served for Tony Blair, both served for Gordon Brown. Aisha Hazarika has been very strong, I thought, over the weekend, saying it's a shameful week for Labour. And the reason Labour's been so seduced by Peter Mandelson over all those years is because of what she describes as a male power structure. I mean, do you agree with her, what she's saying?
Well, yes, you're right that I served in the cabinet with Peter Mandelson between 2008 and 2009 when Gordon Brown brought him back into government, when I was focused on fighting terrorism and tackling crime and violence against women, and he appears to have been focused on downloading information and sending it to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm pretty... I was going to say a word that you shouldn't say on the telly. I'm pretty angry about that. More importantly, and this is where I think Aisha's right, at the heart of this issue is the rich and powerful men across the world who enabled and were complicit in the rape and abuse of young women. And if I know one thing about the Prime Minister, it's that he is absolutely determined to take action on that. When I first met him back in 2007, it was when he was Director of Public Prosecutions and I was working on, as Home Secretary, on how we tackle violence against women and girls. He was absolutely driving the Crown Prosecution Service to tackle that issue. And I know that it's what he will continue to do now.
I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about your announcement today. It's fair, obviously. It's about apprenticeships. What is it?
So this is National Apprenticeship Week. It's a really important week in which we can both celebrate what apprenticeships mean to people, young and older, but we can also make clear that the opportunities that apprenticeships provide, particularly for young people, helps to give opportunities to young people that they haven't had enough of in this country. And we will improve both the information around apprenticeships and we'll also pivot the system so that there are more opportunities for young people, and we can see that helping both young people to get on and also driving the growth and the opportunity we need to see in the economy as well.
OK, Jackie Smith, thank you very much indeed. Jackie Smith speaking to us then.
More now on our top story. Sir Keir Starmer's fighting for his political future after losing his right-hand man, Morgan McSweeney. Well, joining us now is the Labour MP, Natalie Fleet. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning.
I guess the top question I have is, if the decision to appoint Lord Mandelson as ambassador warrants heads to roll in number 10, is it enough for the person that collated the advice to go and not the person that made the final decision?
I'm incredibly biased because I believe that the person that can sort violence against women and girls in all its forms is absolutely the Prime Minister. I believe him when he told me that he knew barely any of this at the time. The papers will come out over the next few days, well, over the coming weeks, and there will be more information and we'll know exactly then what the Prime Minister did and didn't know. But I believe him when he tells me that he had no idea about this. When he did find out in September, he sacked Mandelson straight away. And my goodness, if he had any idea of the information that we hold now, then there's no way that Peter Mandelson would have been in place.
But, well, just that I think you're alluding to some of his what appears to be his leaks around sensitive information as business secretary. But to the point about violence against women and girls, the Prime Minister himself has acknowledged he knew the man that he appointed to be ambassador maintained a relationship with a convicted paedophile.
Yes, and that relationship was absolutely played down. The Prime Minister's made it really clear that he knew what was in the public domain, but Peter Mandelson told him that they were acquaintances, they didn't see or have much to do with each other. We just didn't know then what we know now. And the reason that I feel so strongly and I'm here today is because we look around the world and there are prime ministers that do not care about violence against women and girls in the same way that our Prime Minister does. His commitment has been absolutely unwavering. This was a huge mistake, one that, your headlines are showing is having horrendous consequences for him. But I want him to stay in place. I don't believe that he should go over it because there's so much more to do around violence against women and girls. He appointed 2 women into Morgan McSweeney's position last night. He has... I want to see us go further and faster. We've already done so much on Vogue. If you are one of the 200 women that are raped today, you can go to a police station. There'll be a specialist officer there. We're tackling the courts so that you don't have 5 years of trauma. And then we're sorting out prisons so that the perpetrator can actually serve the sentence. It's so hard to make shame change sides. But you can only do that if you have a Prime Minister that is absolutely on the side of victims. I believe that Keir Starmer is, and that's why I want him to stay in place.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting that is the number one issue for you, and yet I think at the heart of this is the fact that your government appointed a friend of a paedophile into a position, so it's almost sort of slightly ironic, not to mention other questions around the speed and extent and remit of inquiries into the grooming gangs issues and the like. But I guess there's another issue to move on to that I think's at the heart of all of this as well. Put aside the decision to get rid of your Chief of Staff to try and protect your own skin is the question about whether MPs do still back the Prime Minister. The vote last week was incredibly damaging to him. Do you think he still has the authority of the party, the Parliamentary Party?
I've been genuinely shocked by the support that he has. So there have been people that have not always voted with the government that have been messaging me over the weekend saying they feel very strongly that he should stay. And it's one of the reasons they feel it is because of the overwhelming and surprising message that we're getting back from the constituency. When I've been out this weekend, the things they've been telling me is, Duck, you've got to support him, he's got to stay in place. I did some media last night and I got messages off the back of that as well saying thank you for speaking out. The emails I've had in my inbox of people I've never heard from before saying we need to stay with him. What's happened is that we've all been scarred by years and years of absolute chaos. We've seen our mortgages go up. We've all felt let down. We haven't been able to deliver. So I want us to stay with Keir Starmer, but so do the constituents and the wider party. The most frustrating thing is that we're doing some incredible things in government. Just last Tuesday, I got to vote to take kids out of my area out of poverty. That's absolutely unbelievable, but nobody's listening to us because this story is rightly at the front and centre. We've now had a resignation. I want the Prime Minister to double down on his commitment to victims, which I know that he holds so dear. And then I want us to continue to deliver for victims, but also for people up and down the country that desperately need a Labour government that's competent, stable and functioning well.
I guess just the final question, Natalie, is I totally get the messages you must be getting from your constituents who obviously matter enormously. But on the MPs, why did they not back the Prime Minister last week on a matter of unbelievable personal importance to him if they genuinely still support him?
I think he was backed last week. I loved it Wednesday. There was absolute cross-party consensus that we needed full disclosure. There can't be any kind of cover-up around what happened.
But that was forcing the government to change their amendment. So they didn't back.
It's our job as
wanted.
backbench MPs to make sure that we get into a position that is right. There was cross-party consensus that we needed to get there. The debate was a strong and lively one. We got to the right place and we'll have a full picture of what happened when all of those documents are released. I am totally loyal to the Prime Minister and I felt very strongly that we should support that motion last week, as we did.
Natalie, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.